In this video, you will learn how to create a front bodice based off of a half-scale dress form using measurements that I have from my half-scale dress form. So this may be different than yours. I'm going to start by measuring up 1 inch off of the bottom of my page with the paper positioned in portrait mode. And this is going to be my waist. And this is going to be the center front, kind of where the belly button would be. Next, I'm going to measure up to where my side neck to waist measurement is. So from here to the high point of shoulder, which is 8 3/4 of an inch. So from this point up, I'm going to measure and mark 8 3/4 of an inch. And then my next measurement is going to be the center front neck to waist square. So center front to neck. And so that measurement is going to be 7 1/2. And then I'm going to square it off at least 1/2 of an inch. Next, I'm going to measure over my center front shoulder ridge. So that's going to be the measurement from this point to this point, and then I'm going to square it down 2 inches, which is going to be 3 5/8. And then I'll square it down 2 inches. And then I am going to find my front shoulder slope. So it's from the belly button to the low point of shoulder, and that's going to be 9 inches. So for this circumstance, you're going to put your ruler right at the 9 inches in this corner, and then you're going to pivot it until it touches this line. Next, I'm going to draw the shoulder length. That's just going to be the length of the shoulder up here. And that is going to be 2 1/4. So again, I'm going to put my ruler here, and then I'm going to pivot it until it hits the quarter mark on this top line. And then I'm going to find where my curve should be. So using a French curve, I want to make sure that this is square for at least 1/2 of an inch so that I don't have a V-neck on my sloper. And then I can play around with the ruler until I find something that looks kind of nice. I like the way this looks, so I'm going to draw it like that. And then I'm noticing that this is a little bit of a V, so I can just smooth that out slightly. Now we're going to start working with apex and placement of the sleeve and arm's eye. So from here down to where the apex would be on the body is going to be 3 7/8. And then I'm going to mark this over 2 inches to where the apex of the bust would be. Now I'm going to find where the mid armhole might be. So in this circumstance, from the center front over the mid armhole is going to be 1 7/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to square it over 3 inches. This is just a guideline for the sleeve. And now I'm going to find center front to underarm. So this is going to be where the underarm seam would be on the mannequin or on the body. So it's 3 inches down. And then I'm going to square it over 4 3/4 of an inch. And then I want to make sure it's square for a little bit. Now I'm going to take the ruler and I am going to connect the dots from here to somewhere on this line. So you might have to play with the ruler. It might not work out for it to touch all of the spots in one pass. You might have to do this point to this point first and then here to here. But I think I can get it pretty good shape like this with my ruler. That looks nice. And now I am going to move on to the waist. So the first measurement is going to be the center front to the princess seam. And that measurement on the half scale for me was 1 1/2 inches. And then next I am going to let this measurement dip down just a little bit based off of my dart length. So my dart length is going to be 3 7/8 of an inch. So I can see that from here to here, it extends past to get to the 3 7/8. So I'm going to mark that right there and just put a little tick mark. And next I'm going to draw a straight line down for the side seam. And then I'm going to measure out 1/2 of an inch. And then I'm going to swing my side seam out, which needs to be 4 inches long, till it touches this 1/2 inch. I'm going to take the ruler and I'm going to line it up with that new side seam line that I just created. And I am going to measure out what the distance is for my side seam to princess seam. And that is going to be 2 inches. But I could also look on my skirt sloper that I just created to make sure that that's accurate. So from here to here is looking correct. And then from here to here, we can measure, that is 2 inches. So with the ruler straight like this, up against this edge so that it is straight on that line, I'm gonna measure 2 inches over and then just put a little tick mark. And then I'm going to connect the legs of the dart. Okay, now if we were to put the dart placement there in real life, it would make the bust a little pointy. So we're going to drop it down 1/2 inch on this half scale. So I'm going down from this line here, dropping down 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to find what the center of this line is. So it's 1/4 inch, so the center would be 1/8 of an inch. And then I am going to draw a straight line down from there. And that's just for reference. And then from here to here, I will continue the line. And then from here to here, I will also continue the line. And really the distance that I'm looking for is right here. So now I've got a nice shaped bodice and I am ready to cut it out. But I'm going to leave a little bit of a bubble down below here. And I'm also gonna leave some space up here so that when I true it to the back bodice, it makes sense and it works nicely together. Make sure that you're cutting the correct shoulder seam. It's going to be the one that's angled down. Okay, now I'm going to close out my dart. So I am going to take the bottom of the dart that's closest to the side seam and then the apex of the dart, smooth that out. And then I'm going to rotate this until these two match together, and I'm looking at those green lines, not the blue ones. So they're the second set of lines that I did. And then I'm going to take a piece of tape and take this here, and now I'm going to make this pretty. So I'm going to use my red marking tool so that you can really clearly see this. So I need the bottom of this line to be square for at least 1/2 of an inch, if not a full inch. And then I also need to make sure that I'm remembering which line is correct here. So I'm going to measure 4 inches down. So it's this one right here. It's easy to get confused with those bottom lines. You can always use measurements to check yourself. And then you'll notice how this is kind of pointy. I'm going to make things that look like a V into a nice U. It should be nice and smooth. And then I'm going to cut my new line. And that is the draft of the bodice. So the next thing that we have to do is to make sure that we've got our markings on here. So I'm going to do my cut one on fold mark. And then I'm going to put a 2 by 2 inch square on the page to put my information on. So we're going to start by saying that this is the front and it is a bodice sloper. We're going to cut 1 on fold. There is no seam allowance included. And then the date and your name. Next, we'll do the back bodice. We'll start the back bodice much like we started the front bodice by measuring up 1 inch from the bottom of your paper. And then this is going to be our waist, and this is going to be our center back line. So we're going to start out by doing our center back line from the center back to the high point of shoulder. That measurement is going to be 9 inches on this half scale. We'll cross mark that up here. And then I'm going to do the center back, so where the nape of the neck is, down to the waist, center back. That's going to be 8 3/8. Next, I'm going to do the shoulder distance, which is from sort of the top of the knob of the shoulder to the center back. That distance is 3.5 inches. And if I put my ruler like this, and I go 3.5 inches over, then I can go 2 inches down really easily. Now I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the front, where I'm going to go from the waist point, and then I need to pivot up until I get to 8 7/8, which is going to be my shoulder slope. That's this distance right here. So 8 7/8, and I'm just going to pivot the ruler until the 8 7/8 point reaches this line here. Okay. And then my shoulder distance is 2 1/4. It's the same as the front, because those two pattern pieces get connected. I'm just going to pivot until I'm touching this point and a point on this line. And next I'm going to use my ruler in order to create an attractive neckline, back neckline, that makes sure that I have some square portion of the neck here. I don't think that this dipped in quite enough, so I'm going to adjust it. There we go. Now I'm going to start figuring out where the placement of the sleeve goes. So I'm going to go back shoulder neck blade and then over, and I'm going to do that for 3 points. So there's going to be one that goes to the center, one that's going to go to the under point, and then you'll have this top line that's going to be your 3rd point. So first mark is 2 7/8 inch down from this point here. So 2 7/8 inch down is this mark, and then that's going to go over 3 inches. Put a little line there. Next, I need it to go down 4 3/4 inch. And that is going to extend out 3 3/4. Okay, now I need to make sure this stays a little square, and I'm going to connect these 3 points. This one seems to be a little bit harder to figure out how it connects, but just keep playing around with the ruler and you'll find something that works. Good. Now I'm going to figure out the dart placement. So in looking at the back waistline dart, this measurement is 1.5 inches. So I'm going to measure over 1.5 inches. And then I just have a prescription for this dart. So this dart is going to be 5/8 inch wide. So I'm going to make 5/8 inch, and then I need to find the center point. So remember that trick that we did before. If I've got 5/8 of an inch, half of that, I'm just going to change the denominator. So it's going to be 5/16 of an inch. So if I count the really little lines on here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that is my halfway point. I want this dart to be 3.5 inches tall. And then I will connect the dart legs. And now I'm going to move on to my side seam. So this next part should also match your skirt sloper. So this should match here, that looks good. And then if I walk this out, I can see that my skirt is supposed to be this long for the bodice and the skirt. And I can just double check my measurements as well. This is 2 inches, that tracks with my other measurement. And then the length of my side seam is 4 inches. So I'm going to span this out to 4 inches here. And then I'm going to leave myself some wiggle room down there. Next, I am going to cut at the side seam. And then I will cut my armhole. And sometimes people will leave a little bit of paper in here just in case they need to adjust the armhole. You are welcome to do that. And make sure I'm cutting the angled line of my shoulder seam. And I liked the second line there for that. And I'm going to pinch out the dart. So I'll start by the side seam dart, pinching this out to the apex. And then I'm going to make it so that I am crossing the dart legs on top of each other, taping down below. And then this is looking pretty good, but there is just a little bit of a V in there. So I can take my ruler and just straighten out or add a little bit of a curve there so that those dart legs are matching nicely. However, if I remember right, it actually needs to go all the way down here, but I'm just gonna wait for a moment because I think that I'm going to need to adjust the length of this together. So if I put my front bodice and my back bodice together, and then I use the ruler with both of them, and sometimes it ends up being a little bit more straight. Sometimes you have to play around a little bit with different types of rulers. I can see that it's gonna look good if I do something like that. And now I can cut this. All of these pieces have to go together. They're like a puzzle. And so you need to make sure that the puzzle pieces all fit. All right, now I will put my grain line information on. We're going to cut 2 of these so that we can actually get the garment on and off of a dress form or a body. And then my square of information. This is going to be back. It's going to be bodice sloper, cut 2, no seam allowance included, the date, and your name. Next, we will true the pieces together. In this video, I'll show you how to draft a half-scale sleeve. Begin by taking a piece of paper and folding it in half, hot dog style. And then you are going to mark the center of the paper with a pencil. Next, you are going to mark a line that is 1 inch down from the top edge of your paper. This is going to be your cap. Next, you're going to mark down 4 inches from the top edge of your paper. This is going to be your bicep line. After that, you're going to measure 6 inches down from the bicep line. And this is going to be your wrist line. This portion right here is going to be indicative of the cap height of your sleeve. So often you can find the cap height by measuring the space between these two markings, but this is a little bit too tall. We might have too big of a sleeve if we made it this distance. So instead of it being this 4 to 5 inches, we've reduced it down to 3 inches. Next, you're going to take your bodice slopers that you already have, and you are going to use a flexi curve ruler in order to measure this distance and this distance. Starting with the 0 point on your front bodice, you are going to walk the ruler so that it is touching the curves. And then once you get to the shoulder cap, you're going to mark what that distance is. Mine is 5 inches on the front. And then if I got the 0 mark placed correctly here on the back sleeve, I can see that that is 4.5 inches. Next, I'm going to take that front measurement, which was 5 inches, and I'm just going to measure out that distance. And sometimes we'll add 3/8 of an inch onto this, sometimes we don't, it just kind of depends. And then on this side, I've got 4.5. I'm going to add a 1/4 of an inch so that I'm at 4 3/4. And this is just going to give me a general guideline. Next, we need to find that half measurement distance. So half of 5 inches is 2.5. I'm going to mark it there. And then half of 4 3/4, an easy way to do that, half of 4 is 2, half of 3/4 is 3/8. So I've got 2 3/8, and I'm going to mark that distance there. Now you're going to draw a straight line down from either of these lines. And then you're going to mark an inch over. And I can see that this was not actually straight, so I'm gonna fix that really quick. There we go. Now I'm gonna mark an inch in here and an inch in over here. And then I will connect the dots for my sleeve seam. Using the flexi curve ruler, I'm going to figure out a line that looks good for the cap of the sleeve, noting that the back line should be a little bit closer to this straight line here. It should intersect here, and then it should round out up here. And then the cap should be similar on the front. It should touch this line, but then it's gonna come down a little bit further here. So I've got the line quite close to this edge here, and then just like an 1/8 of an inch or so down below there. You'll get used to what a good shape looks like for different types of sleeves as you continue to pattern make. So again, for my back sleeve, this was 4.5 inches. This measurement needs to touch this line, and this point, and it needs to be at least 4.5 inches. So it can go over up to 1/2 of an inch. So I could go all the way up to 5 inches. And that's looking like what I'm gonna do. So I'm going to keep this line at 0, and then I'm gonna intersect at this halfway point, and then I'm gonna have this line up here at 5. And then sometimes you need a friend to help you hold this ruler in place. I'm gonna draw that line there. And then my front was 5 inches. So I'm going to adjust my ruler so that my 0 is here, and that at least 5 inches. I can make it up to 5.5. I'm gonna do 5 1/4, I think. I'm just gonna make sure that I'm touching all of these points. And again, this part is a little tricky, just takes some practice to get, but having at least a an idea of what the measurement might be is really helpful. And you can also come back in with French curve in order to get the shape that you need. Now I'm going to take my scissors and cut the cap. And I'm going to cut down the side seams, but I'm going to leave some space down below to adjust the fit and the trueness of the sleeve. And now I'm going to fold it in half so that these two top corners are touching, like so. And I'll put a little piece of tape there. And I'll smooth it down, and it's not gonna fold right on the half point that you created, that's fine. But we wanna tape it so that the two edges are touching. And then we'll kind of open it up and fold it like so. And then you'll notice that's a little pointy down here. So I'm gonna smooth that out by taking a curved ruler, and I'm just gonna make that point that's a little bit triangular curved like this. I'm going to add a notch while I am here. And then I can cut that tape where I can rip it. And then I'm going to cut out my new wrist line. And I have drafted the sleeve. So let's go ahead and add grain line. It's going to be that center line there. I will put my square of information on. This is going to be sleeve sloper, cut 2, and they'll need to be mirrored. No SA included. The date and your name. And then the last thing that we need to do is to true the bodice to the sleeve. So I'm gonna start with the back, and this is going to be my back, and this is going to be my front. And then when you fold it in half, you should make sure that you see more of the back coming through. So I shouldn't see the front when I turn it like this. I should cut in a little bit more on the front. And I'm going to play leapfrog and true this by starting with the seam down below here. And then I'm just going to start to walk it out. Making sure that all of the pieces of the paper are touching between the pins. And so sometimes you have a long distance between the pins, sometimes it's a short distance. And you just have to make sure that the sleeve is the same size or bigger, and it can be like 1 to 2 inches bigger, honestly, than the bodice. So that is where my back is ending. So I couldn't see it in the camera. Okay, put that away. And now I'm going to match up my front sleeve to my front bodice like this. And I will start to walk up, truing these two seams together. And also it's helpful to mark placement of notches. I should have done that on the front already, but I can poke 2 holes. We've got 2 notches for the back and 1 for the front. And that is matching up just right. So now all of my pieces are true, and I am ready to try the fit on this for my half scale dress form. Now that I have my pieces together, I want to true from the top to the bottom. So I'm going to start by putting my 2 shoulder seams together, and then you can either tape them or pin them. I'm going to tape mine together. And then we're gonna look at the curvature of the armhole and also the neck hole. So we'll zoom in just a little bit. So this armhole, or excuse me, this neck hole, I wanna make sure that it's looking nice and smooth. Noticing that it just looks like there's a little bit of pointiness happening in there, and so I have a couple of options. I can add, subtract, or split the difference. So if I subtract, that's going to mean that the armhole, or excuse me, the neck hole is going to come out a little bit further away from the body. So if I wanted to, I could cut that. Alternatively, I could tape some paper in here. I could come in like this and add just a bit of paper onto here, or I could do something in between to split the difference there. Since no one's going to be wearing this, I'm going to do the fast, easy method, which is just going to be to cut this out a little bit, and then I can always add it back in later on my next pattern after I do some fitting. Next, I'm going to look at the armhole, and you'll notice that there's a bit of a jog right here, and I don't want that. So again, I can add, subtract, or split the difference. I do want this to be a little straight, so I'm going to straighten out right here, and then I am going to cut on that line so that I get a little bit more of the look that I'm going for. There's a little bit of an optical illusion because of the blue lines, but you can see that it's this nice sort of hook shape. And then I want to give myself a little notch there. And now I'm going to look at the side seams. So when I'm looking at the side seams together, I want this shape to kind of look like a fish hook. And I want the front to be lower than the back. If you have something that's like this or like that, something has gone wrong with your measurements, and you just need to go back and track and make sure that you have all of your measurements right. But this is looking nice. There's a good amount of space in here. If it's super tight like that, that's gonna be too small. That means you need to take out a little bit more of paper on your armhole. And if it's looking really wide, then you might have another issue with measuring. We've already trued this bottom to make sure that it is looking good. And so I can add a notch here, and you can use a notcher to do this, or you can just draw these notches on. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is true my bodice to my skirt. So first, because I have these really dark marks, that's helpful for me in seeing what I'm doing as I'm truing. But if you don't have those, you can just stab through the bottom legs of your dart on your bodice. And then I'm going to start by putting my two center backs together, and I'll put a pin, and I will start to walk out till I get to a flat straight point in the bodice. And then if I pin these both together and they are the same, that means that they are true. So then I can hop over, and starting from this seam here, I can start to walk to the other dart leg, and I can see that it's a little bit off. So if I walk this out, I have my dart on my bodice coming here and the dart on my skirt coming here. So again, I can add, subtract, or split the difference. So I think that I'm going to add. I think that this got just a little off when I was measuring it. And I can see that it looks a little bit off too. And I can find that pinpoint that I just made with the pin. And I'm gonna redraw this dart leg on, and then I'm gonna X this out. And now those should be true. I'll move on to my front, and I'll do the same thing, where I'm going to take the center front, pin here, and I will start to walk out the seams, making sure that they are straight together. And that looks great. I can tell that those are lining up. So I'm going to unpin, mark from here, play a little leapfrog, and I'm noticing that the darts on my front are also true. So that is how you draft a skirt and a bodice together.